All right, it is 4:30, and we're going to go ahead and get started here. So this is virtual reality, past, present, and no, it's not. This is eSports. So we're going to talk about eSports for a little while. You can see the name of the slide there. There's our names up there. We're going to do a brief introduction to go along with this. This is my third time at MAGFest doing something on eSports. You know, eSports has been around for a lot longer than 3 years, obviously. But it's really caught fire the last, I would say, 7 years, even more so in the last 3 or 4 years. So it's always fun to do an eSports panel. I'm going to act more of like almost a moderator here because these guys know a lot more than I do about eSports. I just research eSports and act like I know what I'm talking about so I can get free trips to MAGFest, which is always a plus. But these guys have kind of been there, done that, talk about it now. So they're really, really good at what they do. So if you got questions about esports, I'm just going to say, hey, you guys, what do you think? So that's kind of how it's going to go. But we're very free form up here. If you've got questions during our talk, please raise your hand, ask questions. If we make it through 3 slides, that's great. If we make it through all 14 slides, that's also great. I don't care. I just want you all to get something out of this, as well as us getting something out of it too. So however far we get, that's great. I'm just going to kind of let it go organically. So if you have questions, please raise your hand throughout the point of talking about this stuff. Before we introduce ourselves, how many of you have let's say, a low-level knowledge about esports? Okay. How about mid-level knowledge? High-level knowledge? Okay.
What about 0-level knowledge? Ryan, raise your hand.
Wow.
So we got a good cross section here. So I put some images up here. I put some logos up here on purpose. I didn't include any words. Does anybody know what all of these logos represent? You got them all?
Okay. Smash Bros, Hearthstone, Evo, Overwatch, Halo, League of Legends. I want to say it's Dota, the one with the black and blue stripes. Counter Strike.
Nope.
No.
You got them all except for that one. ESL. Woo! Yes, it is ESL. So I did some games. I also did some organizing governing bodies like EVO and ESL. Yes, the Overwatch logo is covering up the word EVO, and I know these aren't sometimes the major logo, but I tried to do ones that weren't giving stuff away. So the reason I put this up there is that even in the gaming community, a lot of people don't know what all these things mean. And these are paramount when you talk about the success of esports in the long run. Logos, and you'll hear my background here in a second while I talk about this. Logos and branding is always very important for the success and longevity of any business. And so that's what we've got to develop, and you got to get this knowledge out there so that people understand what these represent. All right? So yes, what's up with these sports? Should we LOL or LOL? It's not going to be just about League of Legends up here. We're going to talk about Overwatch a good bit. We'll mention Halo, some other things, but I thought the title was funny. I stole it from an academic paper that was published, so it's not my original thing, but I stole it anyway. But I thought, yeah, why not? Get a good laugh. So why are we talking? Who are we? So I'll start with myself. My name is Dr. Joey Gariziak. I work at Shenandoah University, which is a very small school about an hour and a half west of here. I actually teach sport management, and that has nothing to do with video games. But I realize if I have to do research the rest of my life, I want to do something fun and something that I like. And so I like video games a lot. And I put sports and video games together, and here's what we came up with, is eSports. So it works out perfectly. So I get to do things like this and travel to ESL and see major events all over the world for free. So it's fantastic. I also get to talk on a radio show and a podcast, so some shameless self-promotion. There's the name of my podcast. It's called The Checkpoint. It's from Press Start TV. My radio show is a little more made for the public, where we don't use such colorful language. And so it's out of Hagerstown. It's pretty small right now, again, out of Press Start TV. It's on Saturday mornings. But we're actually in talks to get it nationally syndicated. And the Checkpoint, the podcast, you can pick up on iTunes or SoundCloud, as well as any other YouTube things like that. It's great. We talk about video games. We also talk about beer, which that's always a good combination, as well as fast food and some TV and movies. So it's a good combination of things, but mostly it's about video games and beer. So if you get a chance, definitely check it out. I have a great time producing it every Wednesday. So if you get a chance, again, check it out. And I'll let everybody else to my left, your right, introduce themselves relatively briefly, but take your time.
All right, yeah. So, hey guys, my name is Reza Mahmoud, and I recently graduated from the University of Maryland College Park. That was like last spring. So right now I'm just applying to PhD programs, but while I was at Maryland, I was really involved in the esports community there. I was president of the League of Legends club there, and I've been shoutcasting almost all their games for the past year and a half. I'm actually shoutcasting the league tournament at MAGFest here today, so I actually came down doing this panel. Probably going to run back up to see if the finals still need to be casted, so you could join me if you want with that. This is my second year at MAGFest. I was on the esports panel. I was on the esports panel with Dr. Goriziak last year, and I also did one on video game skill assessment because I've been working in psychology labs, kind of looking at different skills video games can provide. But yeah, so I'm mostly involved in League of Legends, like heavily involved. But I also do like to follow generally the esports scene, so it's pretty much all about me.
Hi everyone, I'm Dominic Beerwish. I'm currently a student at Arcadia University. It's up near Philadelphia, and I'm an esports fan. I like Dota, League of Legends, CS:GO. I like my plethora of esports, and watching them is a lot of fun. And I've just been really interested in the scene and the growth of it, and so I've really followed online and through talking to different people that I know, how is this going to be like the next generation of sports, and why is everybody watching, and why are we teaching kids, oh, video games are bad? Well, that's not necessarily true, because obviously there's money to be made. So yeah.
Hey, I'm Oliver Surplus. This is my 7th MAGFest, and I'm just a general teacher specializing in history and special education for about 9 years, and especially when you deal with middle school, high schoolers, and the occasional elementary school, you just mention sports, and they're like, staring at you like this. So I'm trying to get ahead of it all with like eSports, plus it's just something I'm interested in, and having seen like Third Strike and various others evolve, which owes that, it was a largely ignored game when it first came out, for the most part, and it owes its comeback and success, I think, to eSports, largely.
Hi, I'm Barry Lee. I'm currently a talent agent at Evolve Talent Agency, and I'm also a 2L law student at George Washington University. Before that, I worked for Energy Esports for their League of Legends squad, and I was their in-house manager. And before that, I was a broadcaster at OGN's League of Legends production. So, Minty Crispy, Monte Cristo is one of my friends, and along with Doa. So, there's a lot to unpack. There's a lot to talk about here in terms of how region differences matter in esports, along with just the scene in general. Because esports we really saw it pick up starting in Korea, and then it kind of spread to the rest of the world, in my opinion. We were the first, damn it.
I think that's fair.
Yeah, I don't think it's an opinion. I think it's pretty much fact.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're fine with that, Barry. We'll give you that one, all right? So, as you can see, a great group of people to talk here. We don't have a main focus. We want to talk about esports in general, and we'll see kind of where it goes. If there's something maybe we'll focus on a little later with the new Overwatch League that's coming out, which I definitely want to talk about a little bit. But I do want to start with this slide right here. And I don't want to spend a lot of time about this concept because 2 years ago, I pretty much threw out there, are esports a sport? Or is this a sport? Should it be considered a sport? And I got 2 slides into my 30-slide presentation, and it took the whole hour. So I don't want to talk too much about this, but I do want to throw this back out there because this is an evolving conversation where people are looking at esports, and you're seeing more and more examples where this fits in the traditional sports world with what's coming out and how it's making money, the way it's put on, the way the events go. So, I mean, for 2 minutes, what do you guys think? What does this panel think? Are esports a sport? Should we call this the next generation of sport? And Oliver's kind of already alluded to this a little bit, but I'm going to throw it to you guys. Are esports a sport?
I say no. Esports is esports. Sports is sports. And the thing is that I think what a lot of people make a mistake about is they're so starved for mainstream acceptance that they'll always try to spew out that some sort of oh, it's sports, we're real, we're not a fairy tale that you tell your kids. So I think it's better to consider that esports is esports, it's its own thing, it's its own industry. It has parallels, of course, to the sports industry, but it is its own entity.
I would say that the majority of esports, maybe with the exception of Hearthstone, that they most of the. I'll explain, but the only real distinction I see between traditional sports and the esports side is that traditional sports involve mostly gross motor movements versus the fine motor movements of like your reflexes and your quick hand movements. So in that respect, I think that esports do qualify as a sport. And actually, if you want to listen to a great like hour-long talk, Dr. Griziak had he was on a talk show called with a sports ethicist that actually dove into this for like an entire hour, which is really cool. But
Hour and a half, just saying.
Oh, my bad. Oh, sorry. But yeah, I like shut down Hearthstone, but just because there's not really a physical component to that, I think that maybe makes a distinction when you use the label of sports. But I also think like we don't really need to get it qualified as a sport. Like Barry was kind of talking about, like we already have our own space, so I don't think it's necessary to label it as such. But I think we can.
Yeah, I'll just chime in and agree. Like, it's entertainment, like sports are, like reality TV is. So I don't think it necessarily matters to mainstream media. It might matter more to them, and they love to debate it because it's a big controversial thing.
Look at those nerds play games for money.
Exactly. And then they're like, oh, wait, they make more than I do in a decade. Okay, that's a bit shocking. But, like, I don't think it necessarily matters for esports to be classified as sports, as long as they're recognized. If you can get a visa to another country to go, play the game that you're really, really, really good at and make a lot of money, I think that's the only distinction where it matters.
I mean, it's interesting you mentioned visas because I think most people, if you're not aware, currently League of Legends players for the Riot's league competition, they receive P1 visas to the United States, which is an athletics visa. So even in the government's eyes, they have been starting to classify a lot of these players as athletes, and so they get athlete visas to play in the United States for money. So in Europe, I think they mostly use working holiday visas. So that's a little bit different in Europe, but at least in the U.S., the government is on its way to at least recognizing esports as a athletics category.
Hashtag free Leffen, if you guys have followed the Smash community for a while.
To me, it's a bit more pragmatic because sports, especially in the realm of popularity, largely the context you were talking about, has always changed. Because if you're really going to be a purist on that, and I see a soul flag, it's like you really should look to the Olympics for that. Like, are we going to be really purist and say only the 5 sports, the pentathlon, should count, and then we're going to throw out everything else as sport? I think people would recognize that as ridiculous. So
Ping pong's
I
not
don't
a
think
sport.
we can, So where's the line? And I guess I'm just trying to keep it open.
Yeah.
Right, and it's hard to define a line, and I do this in some of my classes, and I don't want to bore you with class stuff, but as Reza kind of alluded to, I call all of these esports, I call them sport, except for Hearthstone, because the physical component is not there. What you do physically in Hearthstone doesn't have an impact on the outcome.
Sorry.
And no, it's fine. I said the same thing. It's on the radio show. I wrote a book chapter about it. I completely agree. But from a sport management perspective, that's a hard sell to other sport management people. When I go to sport conferences, they look at me and laugh. They say, "Video games? Are you kidding me? Get out of here." Also, they're mostly in their 60s and 70s, so they don't even know what video games are. But when I actually talk to them and break it down for them, it makes sense to call it a sport. Okay?
Well, the big thing though is that is what usually changes people's minds about it is when you start throwing numbers at them, especially the amount that these players are starting to make. I think in North America, to at least I'll give League of Legends player numbers just mainly because I'm most familiar with that scene. The average League of Legends imported player earns 200K plus a year from the organizations. Wow. I think the highest right now is about a 750K contract. That is the highest for a year. So, yes, a year. That is a large amount of money.
That's the same, yeah.
I'm a talent agent. I actually dealt with that deal. So, the thing is that the average North American player earns about 100K, which is still very, very good. So once you start giving people these numbers about salaries, how these teams are taking care of them, especially this year, there was talks that Riot was going to mandate all teams give full employee benefits to all of their players, which would include taxes, like health insurance, a bunch of things. And once you break that down, you talk about money because money talks, unfortunately. You break that all down to a lot of these people, and then they're very much willing to kind of see things your way, to be honest.
And
There were
do you have a question
couple quick
earlier, and
comments
then maybe
here. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I have one thing. So, would you change your mind about Hearthstone not being a sport if I told you chess is officially considered a sport, even though there's not a physical?
So the question for the camera was, would I change my mind about Hearthstone if you told me chess was considered a sport officially? It is in some circles.
Officially by who?
I know. For me, it is not. By my definition, I use a textbook definition in my sport classes, and I totally understand why some people consider it a sport and why it can be and is largely considered a sport. I totally get it. And a lot of things like poker as well it's called a mind sport, more or less, or a mental sport. And I see that argument, but for me, it doesn't fit with traditional sports because in Hearthstone or poker or chess, just because you move something, just because you hold your cards better than somebody else or fold better or because you move your chess piece here better than somebody else, that has no impact on the outcome. Your actions per minute, your button actions per minute have a direct impact on the outcome in these other games like Dota, League of Legends, things like that. So and I go way into depth about this and other things. I totally understand the argument, but from my personal definition, I don't agree. But I see both sides. I really do. I get why it certainly can be considered a sport.
There was another question?
Being on ESPN doesn't make a sport. I see it. Spelling bee, not a sport. Cool, fun to watch, but not a sport.
Back
Mr.
there.
in the beard. Yes.
There was a tweet he had out saying that he was going to be on one of the casts because like his salary wasn't met, like the demand wasn't met. Is it like money you feel is impeding progress or helping to push forward because money talks?
I would say it's helping to push forward. I talked with Monty a lot about this, mainly because.
Can you repeat the question real quick?
Oh, sorry. So for the camera, the question was, there was a recent tweet by a League of Legends caster saying that he wasn't going to be on a broadcast for a League of Legends championship because they weren't offering him enough money. And so the question was, correct me if I'm wrong, is it helping, is that kind of money helping or hurting the industry? And I would actually say it's helping the industry, mainly because you want, talent should be paid like talent, and what that does is it creates an ecosystem where people can leave their day jobs and make an actual living out of this. And the more people you have fully invested in a job like that, it not only legitimizes that job, it also makes it attractive for other people to actually, try their best to attain the level of skill needed to have that as their job. So I would actually say like that kind of like money is something that is actually driving the growth of the industry. And the people that say that hurt it are cheapskates that don't want to pay.
And
so.
Also, to kind of build off on that, because esports is still kind of in its infancy, we're still kind of setting a lot of the groundwork for how a lot of, well, particularly the hot topic in League of Legends is like revenue sharing. As the industry is like really growing to these massive and self-sustaining levels, there are going to be growing pains, and we've seen that with us, particularly like with the revenue sharing between a lot of the teams in the League of Legends Championship Series, as well as with things like paying talent like casters to perform at different events. And so even though there are like there's a lot of debate, there's a lot of conflict, there's some like scandals that maybe come out from this, that's just kind of part of the growing process. And even when you get to like the big time level, I don't know if any of you follow American football, but even a few years ago they had a referee lockout where the refs wanted to argue for better positioning, so they just refused to participate in the NFL games. And so these kinds of things like really aren't, they don't go away ever when you have a lot of money involved. And just the fact that the industry is growing at the rapid rate it is kind of lends itself to there just being a little more struggle between people. They're trying to get the piece of the pie that they really want.
I like football. Is that allowed? Cool.
There's a
Glad.
gentleman at the back with the sunglasses.
So I was just going to point out that when you're playing poker, you're playing chess, there is a physiological component because you're reading your opponent's expressions
depends on the tournament.
Yeah, I could totally see that. Again, I see these arguments. I totally understand how these can be considered sports and the physiological component. But to me, does that have a direct impact on the outcome? Yeah, but I could also argue no. I mean, there's a lot of gray area in arguments. You can define all these things however you want. End of the day, it makes it for a fun conversation. If
Sports
nothing else.
punditry would be a whole nother thing.
Yeah.
Sports punditry.
Yeah, but no, I see that argument definitely. That's a good argument.
How many more questions are we taking, or should we move on?
We can take two more quick ones. I see there's two more hands right here
Okay,
in the dark.
the gentleman with the phone, I think, yeah.
So, if you were going to, with the two major MOBAs that are out there, League of Legends and Dota 2, they follow two different formats. One's a regular season, postseason, and like World Championship format, and the other is a majors format. Which do you think lends itself better to competition internationally, and also leads itself to better just competition?
I'll take it first. So that's a big hot topic, I think, within the communities. And
Repeat that, Barry.
I'm really bad at this.
Come on.
So to repeat the question is, Dota, the two MOBAs, Dota and League of Legends, have different formats. Where League of Legends is league style play, where the Dota 2 is more tournament based play, which the majors versus a league format. So, and which is better? I think, is that correct?
Better for.
Which lends itself to better international competition. Yes, is that what you said? So specifically for international competition, I would say the Dota 2 format with the majors. CS:GO also runs that, but they also have leagues as well. So that lends itself to better international competition by pure virtue of the fact that there are no region lockouts in most of these tournaments. With League of Legends, you have region lockouts among the major leagues across the world. You have Korea, Europe, North America, China, and yeah, and then you have
goodness.
LMS. And then you have various smaller regions that compete for the wild card spots. So on one hand, I think it's those kinds of regional lockouts are necessary to help develop regional talent, and it promotes a stronger. It's better for developers, I think, to have those kinds of region lock tournaments, because they can create much more of a kind of a regional fan base, and then they cheer for when the international competition happens. And but for the best competition internationally, I would say the majors format will give you the best teams consistently.
Yep. Last one.
It's not even really a question. I have two quick statements. As far as the Monte Cristo thing, he actually, when he was picked up for the Overwatch, was a caster, and he has like a 10, 15-minute spiel with Yahoo eSports explaining yada, yada, yada. So that's information if you want to go check it out. The only thing I wanted to pick back real quick off of him, I don't even think that the tournament is really the issue. I think it's more about Overwatch is going with a franchise, and then League is, and I think because League is cutthroat, right? If you go bottom two, you have to be good. So I think it's more about how the teams are structured more than it is the tournament.
So you're talking about the. So your question is like, you think it has to do with the format, or are you just trying to clarify what he was saying?
I think it's more. I think to get good competitive play, it's more based on how the teams have to compete versus just going to a tournament. What I'm trying to say, like LCS, you have to be good or you get kicked out.
All right.
Overwatch is going to be more secure, if that makes sense.
Right.
Yeah, so the comment was that Overwatch is going for a system that has like franchisement, where teams would kind of stay in the league from season to season, whereas League is a lot more cutthroat in that if you perform poorly, you can get knocked down to relegations and possibly lose all the investment. Sadly.
Energy Sports Cup.
But I would, in reference to how like the Valve games, Dota 2 and CS:GO function, I would actually say that those are a lot more cutthroat, because a league system allows teams like NRG that maybe aren't in the top 3 or 4 to actually get a lot of attention and screen time. Whereas if you're in CS:GO, if you're not placing in the top 8 in the world consistently, you're not going to get any cut of the revenue for any meaningful kind of effort and training that you've been going throughout the whole year. So I would actually say that, well, I think it would be tiered. So like Overwatch would be the most forgiving because you're guaranteed to spawn in the league. Then League of Legends, you have a guaranteed 10-week period through which you can advertise for your sponsors. You can do sponsorship requirements and like get your name out there to try to build up a fan base. And then the CSGO and Valve, the CSGO and Dota system, while I do agree with Barry that it does produce more international competition, I would say it really hinders smaller team growth.
Yeah. All right. So to move on, I said 2 minutes and we went about 20. So that was close. No, but some quick facts about, some sport examples, just so you know that they are out there. Esports do sell out very popular sport venues like the Staples Center, which is where this little team called the Los Angeles Lakers play their basketball games. But they sell out these mega, massive sporting venues every single time. We're going to get into the college esports scene a little bit, especially some of these guys that have done stuff in colleges before. But some colleges now actually offer athletic scholarships, not scholarships, athletic scholarships to play League of Legends. We've got, Barry mentioned already, you can get a sport visa. The U.S. government recognizes you as an athlete to come to the U.S. and participate in some esport events. We've got things like Heroes of the Dorm, which is a Heroes of the Storm tournament that is put on, is broadcast on ESPN. You can go on there, you can pick your brackets like you do March Madness for NCAA basketball. You can go in there and pick out which team you think is going to win and who's going to win each round. So it's very similar to the March Madness format for NCAA basketball that now Heroes of the Storm goes into. And they get scholarships. They get $40,000 of scholarships for the winning team, each of them. Also, one of the most recent telling ones is that esports is in the X Games as a medal event. It's been there for about 2 years now, and the winter and the summer X Games. So Halo players can get gold medals for winning the Halo tournament in the X Games. It is recognized as an X Games event now, and it sells out more than any other X Games event does. Extremely popular. Wow. The other X Games athletes aren't so happy with it being there, but it is there. Okay? It is there.
There was a picture of a guy biting one of his medals, and then I think someone quoted it. I think it's like female. What was it? It wasn't skateboarding, but it was one of the other events. And she was like, they're not really like moving, doing this stuff. It's like grumpy, grump. And it's like,
there's a big disconnect right now between the traditional athletes. Even X Games, calling them traditional athletes is kind of counterintuitive when it's the X Games. But even between those athletes and the esport participants, I'm not going to say athletes, I'll say participants, there's a big disconnect right now. But maybe the most telling, and the one I wanted to add in here, is that Los Angeles has said they want to include elements of esports in their Olympic bid for the 2024 games. So LA right now is seen as the front runner for the Olympic Games for 2024, and the awarding process goes out next year. It's 7 years out, so 7 years out from 2024 is 2017. So it will be awarded next year, and LA has said they want to include esports elements, take that for what you will, in their bid process.
They should just give Korea all the gold medals.
No.
It's like, just quit while you're
So
ahead.
you have to play for your home country, right? Damn it.
Yeah.
Well, I certainly hope you're not going to the Olympics just to win medals. And esports, that could certainly sour it, in my opinion, if they make statements to that effect. And I don't think they will, but, the Olympics are about a lot more than that.
Do you have a question?
This is more of a comment that ties into this particular slide, but I play a lot of Smite, and the Smite World Championships are actually this weekend.
Oh, yeah.
And leading up to this weekend, there were a few comments made by the developers that said that the arena where the SWC was taking place actually sold out. To the
Nice.
point where you can actually watch the I think it's, I don't know if it's the entire weekend or just like the grand finals, evil term, sorry. Watch the finals of the game in select movie theaters around the U.S.
They do that for League of Legends.
And sponsored by Coke.
Yeah, they do that for League of Legends as well. Coke Esports has been investing pretty heavily into the esports side for a couple of years now. To give you a parallel for that, for the League of Legends World Championships at the Staples Center this year, the venue sold out. On top of that, what they did is they had an outdoor kind of viewing arena that ended up getting shut down because they were going past 10 p.m. because the series went a full 5 games of 40-minute games where SKT kept throwing, and then
SKT, please.
Our Lord and Savior, Becky.
We need to get a Wimbledon type situation
Yeah.
going for that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but like this regularly happens. To give you another statistic, I think in the 2014 World Championships of League of Legends was held in the World Cup Stadium in Seoul, and that was a 14,000 seat event that was completely sold out. And so, I mean, to reiterate, like these events are selling, and venues are quite frankly, the venues are starting to see this as a very good source of income for them when they host these events. So it's interesting to see what other venues will open up in the future for all these esports events, and crossing your fingers for more big stuff.
Like the Olympics. But we'll see. We don't know if it's going to happen, and we don't know in what capacity. Now, esports could not be an actual official event this year. It has to go through the demonstration phase first, but it can be a demonstration event at the Olympics. But it has to be approved by the IOC going forward before it can be on the docket for an official recognized Olympics event.
It's a lot of sport management terms.
A lot of sport management terms in there, I know, sorry. But the point is, people recognize this. I always thought that it would be in the Olympics. I didn't think it'd be recognized this soon, but being in LA, it really makes sense. I mean, that's a big hub for the US. And just having it in there, the Olympics is trying to reach the 20-year-old generational people, because there's a big disconnect between people that are in their 20s and 30s watching the Olympics. They just don't do it anymore. But if you throw something like esports in there, they see the recognition, the popularity. I mean, maybe this is something that's going to draw more people in just to watch not only this, but other events in the Olympics as well. That's kind of the draw that LA is going on at this point. Yes?
Rising tide.
So if you're going with the whole, when you're talking about casting though, NBC has a very specific cast of people for the Olympics. Do you think they'd hire new people for esports, or do you think you would see like Bob Costas?
No, they would have to hire. Bob Costas would not know what's going on in this. There is no way. Yeah, so the question was, would NBC hire new casters? Yes, they would. They would not use their traditional, because this is so different.
Are you telling me Bob Costas is an omniscient god? Like,
Yes.
He's
Yeah.
a professional.
I don't think he would
gun
make
control.
it work. Yeah, so yes, they would definitely have to hire new people. And I don't know if it would be League of Legends. I don't know if it would be Halo. I don't know if it would be Overwatch. I don't know what esport game they would use. My initial guess would be League of Legends, if I had to guess
Hearthstone?
one. Not Hearthstone. It's not a sport. Anyway, given all this stuff, who gives a shit? Who cares? Does it matter if we call this a sport or not? Philosophically, maybe yes or no. If you really care for your personal values, sure, go ahead and argue it. At the end of the day, this is an entertainment business, and it makes bukus of money. Just like sports, just like movies, just like concerts and music, this stuff is a big business. And whether you like it or not, calling esports and video games, competitive video gaming, a business, it's a business now. And people recognize that, and it's being run like a business. Projected to be a $1 billion industry by next year. Just esports alone, not video games, but esports, $1 billion industry.
right, and to kind of like give you more of an idea is that the big money going into esports right now, we have the Philadelphia 76ers bought an esports franchise, Dignitas, and then you have the Sacramento Kings with Energy Esports. You have a bunch of these traditional sports money coming into esports. MLB just signed a 6-year broadcasting deal with Riot Games for $300 million. And a lot of money is coming into the industry. And frankly, when you ask who gives a shit, like the average person might be like, nerds playing video games. I mean, the people with money think this is a real business opportunity. So that's what matters.
Yeah, video games have been making $1 billion, I think, since at least '93. You know, NBA Jam. So it's not really surprising at all. You know, Mortal Kombat 2. So it's just natural.
The gentleman, the sunglasses.
So, my big question with esports is, what's the technology audit like to ensure that it's fair? You know, you play Halo 1 on the PC, or you even play Halo 1 on the original Xbox. I know these are older games, but I remember on Halo 1 on the Xbox, 2 controllers would actually run your character at different speeds. And then online, networking in Halo 1 on the PC, whoever hosted the game just dominated, right?
Right.
Their time, their lag time was so much better. Like, I mean, what's the audit process like for League of Legends and these other games?
Yeah.
So the question is, how do you ensure fairness between the different types of esports and the different formats like Right.
Right.
The best way to put it is that all the top tier competitions are offline. So what they do is that they play either on a local area network that they set up for that specific match or tournament. And so to give you another League of Legends example, Riot has their own studio, which is right next to their main campus in Santa Monica, and then that is a dedicated arena where teams will come to compete every weekend, and essentially the way they ensure that kind of fairness for paying lag is that the tournament organizers host it, and it's all offline to kind of make sure there's no extraneous online elements, and that's where that fairness component comes in. Of course, there's online competitions as well, and I think they circumvent a lot of the issues by having the tournament organizers host everything, so people are on a similar type of ping or whatever delay that they're on.
Yeah, it's interesting. Overwatch, does Overwatch have a LAN?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
It's still in the process. Blizzard has not officially announced what the format is going to be, but they have talked about kind of what they want to do, and we're going to talk about it real soon.
Yeah, and we keep mentioning Overwatch like in the same like kind of vein as like Dota 2, CS:GO, League of Legends, Smite. But just keep in mind that it came out 2016, so it's still like a brand new title, and the fact that we can even like include it with these huge games that have been around for years now is actually just impressive in and of itself.
Well, that's because Blizzard's been pushing it.
Yeah, Blizzard can do that. Blizzard's got the resources to
that
do
helps.
that. Yeah. So the slide you see up there, resumed, so you can see the typo in there where the international is kind of obscuring peak viewers and everything else. So I blame Reza on you not being able to read this slide. But basically, I've had up there just some statistics to back up kind of what we've been talking about already. It's extremely popular, lots of money involved with this. And you see the percent change, there's a lot of plus signs on there. That's a good thing in business. All right, so everything is getting more popular. The number of tournaments, the amount of tournaments, the dollars involved with this, participants, it's all going up. Esports is only continuing to rise. And then there's always esports in college, which I'll let these guys talk about a little bit.
Yeah, so I've been pretty involved with the University of Maryland College Park League of Legends Club myself, and Dr. Gariziak, or Joey, I'll just call you Joey. Yeah, it's just so uncomfortable every time I have to say doctor. All right, so yeah, Joey was talking about things like all these collegiate tournaments and sponsorships that are coming out from different schools, like Robert Morris University was the first school to give a scholarship. University of California, Irvine, actually, which is conveniently located right next to Santa Monica at Riot Games Studios.
Not right next to, but yeah.
Or well,
It's close.
if you compare, like we're in Maryland, but they're driving distance. It's pretty close. They've actually constructed their own esports arena. So I think their current League of Legends president, Jesse Wang, who I'm pretty close with, he's really excited because they're also getting scholarships, and now they have a dedicated like building, like a sports arena, where they can kind of give people a similar feeling to PC Bong, like if any of you are familiar with that
PC
in
Cafe.
Korea. Yeah. So the UCI is kind of at the forefront of a lot of what the collegiate stuff are doing, but there's several schools in the U.S., and there's even a couple schools like over in Europe that have offered these kinds of scholarships. And then for the past couple of years, League of Legends Riot Games has kind of created the University League of Legends Campus Series. Actually, Maryland made it to number 4 last year, so go Terps. But I had a couple of friends that were on the team, which was really cool to see them get interviewed by Riot, and actually they got flown out to the live event. And the game was casted on one of Riot Games' official channels, which was pretty cool. So and they also got scholarships for placing pretty highly. And then Here's the Dorm, like Joey was talking about, is also huge. I mean, they got on ESPN for collegiate games, and there are a bunch of show matches going on between these teams. So the collegiate scene is really starting to develop more. I tried to get some kind of like funding process at Maryland, but since we're like a really big and kind of bureaucratic university, being a state school, it's kind of a slow process, but hopefully eventually we'll get there.
At least from a team management perspective, having these collegiate scenes ensures that there's a healthy player base to draw off of. So currently, all of the teams try to draw straight from the ladder, from the competitive kind of ladder within the game. And sometimes that's not the best place to get people because since this is a team game, when you play on the matchmaking on the ladder, it's a very different environment from when you play in a team environment. So when you have these collegiate tournaments going on, then you can say, oh, that guy, he knows how to play the team game. He knows how to, he might not be placed high in the ladder, but he knows how to play as part of a team. So that is a crucial difference. And I think the big thing is that if collegiate esports grows and grows, it'll just only feed more and more into the top tier competition.
Yeah, and let's be clear on one quick point that the NCAA does not recognize esports as a sponsorship sport.
I don't recognize them.
You can, you cannot offer athletic scholarships if you are an NCAA school, but you can offer scholarships in general. Now, Robert Morris University of Illinois, this is not the one in Pennsylvania, this is the one in Illinois, and UPike, as well as a couple other schools, they are NAIA schools, they're not NCAA schools. So, as long as you're not in NCAA, you can offer athletic scholarships. But if you are in the NCAA, you cannot. And I think I want it to stay that way because if the NCAA takes over, it's not a good thing.
Yeah.
Okay?
When it comes to that, not to be too overly political, but do you think esports would be in a uniquely position to argue for the equity of student athletes in general, kind of like as a start of a movement? Because something needs to happen on that, I feel.
No.
Wait,
If football couldn't do it, football's, we're having so much trouble and issues with NCAA football players and basketball players or revenue-generating sports. I don't think esports would do it. I don't think that...
Even if we're talking like 10, 20 years. I mean
10, 20 years, who knows what's going to happen? 10 years
so.
ago from now, I couldn't tell you what was happening 10 years ago. I was in undergrad. And esports was like nothing. I was playing Halo 1 still, competitively. It was great.
It's probably because he wasn't a Brood War fan. So if he's saying esports was nothing. Dirty casual, admitted.
Master Chief! Look at Master Chief back there.
Shout out.
I know, it was really strange, but 3 pistol shots to the head every time. It was fantastic. That pistol was so overpowered, but it was fantastic. Everybody had one. It was fair. So we kind of are running out of time, and I do want to make sure we get to this point right here because I know that some of us differ on our opinion of the new Overwatch League and what is going to happen with this. This is like, to me, this blew my mind when I read about what Blizzard was planning to do with Overwatch. That they are going to structure and have franchise teams based in cities like traditional North American sports and sports around the world, where you have a team based in Houston or New York or DC or LA, and that team has longevity. They have contracts, so they're paid a certain amount of dollars per year instead of just relying on tournament dollars. That way they're guaranteed these contracts and benefits, as Barry kind of started talking about earlier. They're guaranteed those benefits as well. They're staying in that city, and that way fans can develop this allegiance to a city and the team in that city instead of a certain player, because players, if you know anything about esports, they switch teams all the time.
Yeah.
They're constantly rotating. But with this, they're trying to get more of a structure and have this league, and it's going to be a worldwide league where you have teams in the Americas, in Europe, in China, Korea, in Southeast Asia, and Oceania. So you're going to have much more of a structured league that mirrors traditional sports, and they're also going to have a combine where players can go on and show their skills to people watching, to managers, owners of teams, and those owners can say, ooh, that guy's good at support, or that's a good sniper, or whatever you might have, and the owners will sign them to a contract based on this combine. If you don't know what a combine is, it's used all the time in sports, especially professional football, where players will go and show how fast they are, how strong they are, how high they can jump, how quick they are with their agility. Same kind of thing with Overwatch. They're going to have an international combine where players are invited to show off their skills. That way owners can say, oh, that guy's good, that guy's good. They don't have to rely on hearsay. They can actually see who is good at what positions and then sign them based on those skills.
And then as a contrast to that earlier overture about like the teams where they're eliminated, based on not being top tier, we can get like the player that's like 192 ends up being the best quarterback ever. Unless you hate the Patriots.
So
but I like lots of teams.
So for me personally, I think this is a terrible idea. Mainly because when you do city-based teams and you limit the amount of teams that could be within a city, and you're doing this all across the globe. I'm Korean, so like the easiest way to put it is 1/3 of Korea's population lives in the Greater Seoul area. So in very densely populated cities, or in small countries with densely populated cities, this is kind of a weird sell, in my opinion. I don't know exactly what the logistics that Blizzard will be implementing in order to make this a lot more palatable. but overall, I think limiting teams to a specific city also like has its own issues with like when you're trying to get the best tournaments games as possible. All of them have to compete on a LAN arena. So then, are you going to be constantly flying these teams out to the LAN arena, or are they going to? How exactly are they going to be city based when they're always in LA, which is where Blizzard is around? So how does this exactly work? It seems nice. It seems like a good idea. Like, hey, sports, but like then it's like, what? Like they've given no details. Like full disclaimer, but like it's just a weird sell in my opinion.
No, I agree. I think it is definitely weird. I think more specifically, I think it's different. And I think we've been dancing around a lot around the idea that each game is really their own thing. League of Legends does its own thing. Dota does its own thing. CS:GO does its own thing. Each game is really like, I guess, best equated to its own sport, and each sport has its own different system. So if Overwatch is really going this way, we don't know like a lot of the specifics, like Barry was saying. So we don't know how it's going to work, but like a traditional like a football team, they need to fly to the home stadium of whatever opponent that they're playing and play that game there. So I mean, I agree that it does seem a little bit weirder to have these city-based things, especially around the world, which is a little bit more sketchy because that requires a lot more travel time, among other things. But I don't see how it would totally fail, because it's been done before in kind of an equitable medium in regular sports.
Well, the way I saw it when they first announced it, I thought it was just Blizzard trying to be a special snowflake and say that
Yeah.
we're doing something different, and then yeah, come on. But once the details do come out, then you can really judge whether it's a good idea or not. Currently, on the information available, I think it's a bad idea.
Infrastructure-wise, it can only be a good thing because I don't know if this is still true, but Andover, Massachusetts is the only one that ranks in like the top 20 in the entire world, and we really need to get a fire lit under our feet for that because there's really no excuse, especially using the 10 to 20 year paradigm again. And it will be necessary for esports, better infrastructure.
Yeah.
So there's a lot. It seems like there's a bunch of different formats that exist, I guess, within each genre of
Right.
of game within esports, and then League and Dota both have different formats and how they approach their competitive scene. As a whole, do you think that's a good thing, a bad thing, or to be determined as to what that's going to do for esports?
So the question was, each of these esports genres have different formats, and is that a good or bad thing that they all have their different types of formats
I think
Or to be determined.
Within
a particular genre. 'Cause
within
I
a particular
understand
genre?
different genres need
Right.
their own
FPS and MOBA can be different, but within the MOBA genre.
Within a single genre. The reason why Dota is the way it is and the reason why League of Legends is the way it is mainly because for League of Legends there was a big developer interference, to kind of put it in one way, because Riot came down from on high and said we are going to have region lock leagues, and then everyone said okay, we have no choice but to accept this. But in general, I think it was a good idea on Riot's end, and it really depends on what they think is better for stability, because the way Dota operates is on a major system. Rather, it's like a lot of big tournaments and a lot of third-party tournaments, and then you have this giant tournament where the first place team gets $8 million if they win. So that is big. But the problem is that when you have such a top-heavy environment where the top teams get a lot of money, but the bottom teams kind of fail to struggle to make ends meet, then you have this really very unstable ecosystem. For example, in Dota, right before the international happens, you see this huge player scramble where like players will just like, oh my god, Arteezy's on this different team now. It's like he's not on, and then it just becomes a huge clusterfuck. Like to be like really honest.
Yeah. We can have our own reserve clause problems or something.
Yeah. So it's so. There are good aspects when you have that much money being offered. You get very good press, you get very good non-endemic interest. But the issue is, what are you sacrificing for it? And the Riot, for all their faults, has stabilized the League of Legends scene quite immensely. And the reason why we're able to enjoy a lot of the kind of growth that we have is due to this stability.
Yeah, and to add to that just really quickly, I think having variation between games of the same genre isn't necessarily bad. If you prefer one system over the other, then there are multiple options for you to choose from. Yeah, so that's just all I wanted to add real quickly before we go on to another question.
It certainly encourages the delineation of like the competitive fire because there's a place for it, but I certainly hope not to the degree that it's demonstrated in mainstream sports.
Let's get a question from someone who hasn't asked a question. So the lady in the blonde.
XFL, baby.
That is an extremely
Yeah.
good question. To repeat the question, with a lot of esports, the developer owns the IP, and when you see football, the NFL doesn't necessarily own football. So, so how do like what was your question? Is this good or bad?
Yeah. What's the
Yeah, and what is
Yeah.
what is the effect of that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big problem, right? So you have the developer. That's why we see a lot of developer leagues. Developers actually running a lot of their own tournaments because they have a stronger control on their intellectual property, their IP. So we saw this in the earlier days in 2010 with Brood War. What ended up happening is Blizzard said, this is our IP, you should pay us money from all the money you're making, OGN and NBC Game, and you should give some of that to us. And OGN and NBC Game essentially give them the giant middle finger and said no.
Yeah, just,
So-
that's StarCraft Brood War. It
Yeah,
refers
that was
to
StarCraft Brood War. And so this has been an issue previously, and it's still an unresolved issue. Right now, a lot of the developers are playing nice with a lot of third-party organizers, with the exception of Riot. But it still needs to be explored more. And in terms of how it affects it, it does limit. Currently, the IP being the esport itself being based on a game that is an intellectual property of a company, the developer does limit competition somewhat in terms of how many tournaments can be presented in one go because they have to receive permission from the developer to use their IP.
Perhaps we should look to the lessons of Activision when they were actually viewed pretty benignly, even though we all hate them nowadays. But they took a stand in the 70s, and maybe they need to have something else when it came to how third parties were formed in the first place.
Yeah, let's not, like, esports really started out with people, kind of playing by themselves and being like, oh, this is fun, playing with their friends, and then being more competitive and wanting to be better than each other, and then it just blossoms, and then people pay to see it. And so it's kind of started from there. It started with just a video game that you play for fun, and then kind of blossomed to now Blizzard just makes a new esport every other year and, rakes in millions of dollars. But, it's sort of hard to force an esport. It's all about people wanting to play it. So I guess in a way that as much as legally that the developer kind of holds all the control there, they also can't, if they abuse that control, their nice thing in esports kind of goes away sometimes because they abuse their power and nobody wants to play with an abusive developer,
I disagree with that point because if you see Riot and what they've done with
All right,
League of Legends,
All right, I guess an exception.
they're not exactly an exception because Valve could literally say to ESL,
James is an ass, and we're not going to work with him in the future.
yeah, they can do that stuff, and the power is completely in the developer's control. It is completely on their side, and the thing is, just because you alienate a couple fans by being heavy-handed doesn't necessarily mean the average player doesn't really notice that. And mostly, if the tournament still runs fine, it's fine. So, I agree with to a certain extent where you're talking about whether if they mismanage the product, it'll end up being their fault. But devs usually don't go that far to that point.
I agree that they don't go that far to abuse that, but I'm saying if it were to, I know some of the stuff Riot has done in the past, is like kind of, I guess, trending towards that line, but I can't think of any examples off the top of my head of devs going like overboard with that sort of thing, but they do have the power to do that for certain, and it is an issue.
Yeah. Question the guy in the blue.
Yep.
Yes. So Dota and League of Legends and Hearthstone are all free to play.
Yes.
And Overwatch is not. I don't know about the other games that you mentioned, but do you think that having a free to play format is a good thing, or do you think that it actually is more helpful to the competitiveness of these esports if you have to pay to get the product?
So the question was, do you think that having a paywall to kind of begin to play the game, like games like CSGO have and Overwatch, where you have to actually buy a copy of the game to play, is that good or bad for the level of competition in the esport? In my opinion, I think it's largely irrelevant because certainly while a paywall will kind of drive away a lot of like casual players or people that aren't really sure if they want to play the game, and that might hurt kind of viewership. I think people that are really competitive and that want to play at the highest level, I think they're willing to invest a one-time payment of games are very rarely more than like $60. And even then, that's just things like Call of Duty and Halo and some of the other PC games like Overwatch is $30, if I remember correctly. So I think people that really want to invest their careers into this I don't think it's a big factor.
One thing quickly.
Go ahead.
We're technically ending in 5 minutes, but if you guys don't have anywhere to go, we can go to 5:45 easy.
We certainly can. I was going to, quick note on that. Reza, I agree with you. I think, and not only that, but remember, these games are mostly made not for esports, but to sell massive copies for entertainment reasons. These are entertainment copies. And so they're not out there to say, we're only going to focus on the esports crowd. We hope they'll buy this or won't buy this, or they'll pay for this, they won't pay for this. They're there for the masses. Overwatch, Halo, Call of Duty, the vast majority of people will never play competitively at the professional level for these games. They're playing it because it's just plain fun. So that's, I see that it's kind of irrelevant as well.
Hell yeah.
Right here in the, yellow lanyard.
So, jumping off of that, with the addition of like Halo 5, for example, like how there was 5 previous games before that, they just recently shut down the Halo 2 servers. So how do we go about, I guess, when we bring about new additions to the game, like what we do about the old games that people like?
This is a great question that I always get every single time I do one of these panels. It's a fantastic question. It's a big issue too, certainly because think about Call of Duty. The question was, what do we do with kind of new iterations of the game that come out year after year after year? What do you do with the old ones? Like the Halo 2 servers just got shut down because now we're going Halo 3 and forward. And so what we do is we just keep moving forward. With a game like League of Legends, it just gets updated. With a game like Overwatch, again, it's getting updated. It's the same game. You're just introducing new characters. You're introducing new maps, new play modes. So you keep the same core game. You just introduce small components one at a time. I think that's what we're going to see going forward with these esports. So they will last more than 1 or 2 years at a time like a Call of Duty might. Call of Duty was pretty bad at this, where they release a new game pretty much every year or every other year. And people would have to relearn how to play, what the mechanics are, what the maps are for this. Where if you have the same core game like Overwatch and just introduce one character at a time or one map at a time, like Oasis just got released on Overwatch. And so if you do that slowly over time, I think you're going to be fine with that. That way it's not a new game coming out, but at least keeps the game fresh.
And what you guys can do is keep coming to MAGFest and supporting us, because one of our big missions is preservation, and I see no reason why servers and stuff, like if you go right around the corner to the video game museum, why that eventually can't be part of it.
I think we, like with like Call of Duty and Halo, those I think are mostly sold as entertainment video games, not like an esport or something like that. Those developers, at least from the way it kind of feels and like the way they just like you get a new Call of Duty every year, those are sold to the masses, and that's a couple $1 million every time they just push one of those out the door. And so they'd rather have that than not have that. Of course, if they put a little bit more effort into, oh yeah, we want to make this the competitive scene and bring it to like an esport and really pay attention to it and not, just update the game. I guess they could do that, but video games for video game's sake, that's what esports started out as.
Yeah.
It really depends on the tournament organizers and what they view as which games they want to play. Because if you look with the fighting games, they're still playing Melee. They're still playing,
Third Strike,
Brawl. They're still, I mean, they're playing different iterations of it, and they keep it going. So it really depends on the tournament organizers. Is there a healthy player base for it? And it really depends.
And there's always room for like a little lapse in that if they want to.
Of
bring it
course.
back, you know?
The best way I would say to think about it is you see Call of Duty coming out every year. Think about it as like they're patching the game in a way, because League of Legends and Overwatch, all these other online games, they patch consistently. And with Call of Duty and Halo, you don't see that. They just release a new iteration of the game, and that is the patch. So
Just a big patch all at once.
yeah, it's just a $60 patch, no big deal.
Yeah.
Question from the guy waiting right there, or the guy on
Blue
the
shirt?
corner, blue shirt.
Blue shirt. Yes.
I got you next, buddy.
Angry Video Game Nerd next.
So when you have about like say for Nintendo that has been really negative towards esports. Like they almost pulled it from Evo, smashed it from Evo, and almost shut it down. What do you do in a situation like that to try to get that support?
The question was about like if you encounter like a company that seems to like Nintendo just has a policy of like being against it, like when they pulled Smash from Evo in this case. I'd like to be specific on that because Nintendo, as a YouTuber named Adam Korlick, he had a very good revelation about how Nintendo has never really cared about technology despite being in various parts, and it's more about not really a niche market. And it's an interesting contradiction almost because of the niche nature of esports right now as it's changing. And I think Nintendo will eventually get on the bandwagon.
The best way to think about it is that what can you do when you have a hostile developer like that?
Again.
There actually is nothing you can do. You're screwed.
Yeah.
Well, I was.
But
Go ahead, Barry. Finish up.
yeah, but yeah,
There's my hostile
with enough
developer.
with enough community support, you can get a dev to change their mind eventually. But for the meantime, there actually is nothing you can do because they own it. They own the IP. So
Can I go?
yeah.
Okay. So the new Nintendo Switch, which will be coming out in March, this I think is going to be Nintendo's kind of foray into this esports idea. If you've seen the demo video with this, you can see them actually going and at esports events with Splatoon and playing that with esports players. They're in the big arena, they're playing right next to each other, and with the Switch, when it comes out in March, it's going to be fantastic. You can take it anywhere you want, put it down across from somebody
let's not
else's
contribute
Switch,
to hype.
and play right there, screen to screen, without that actual LAN connection.
Is this an
But they
advertisement?
sync up. Yeah, sure. If I get a free Switch, sure. I can advertise all you want. But I think Nintendo is going to get into this. With that advertisement, when I saw that, I was like, yes, here they come. Because I know they've been against it, but I think now with the Switch, it really lends itself to this esports scene. And I think they're recognizing, hey, this is pretty cool. Let's get into this. Start with something like Splatoon, and we'll see where it goes from there.
They've been like that in the past with like online broadband, Mario Kart, but we tend to look back on that pretty charitably, and I'm sure it will be maybe because of the nostalgia factor, but I think they'll be okay.
Just as long as they don't reintroduce tripping into Smash. Please.
Are you telling me RNG isn't good for competitive games?
Oh my.
Well, let's just talk about Hearthstone then.
Shots fired.
All right, Angry Video Game Nerd.
So I had a question when the question was asked about the free versus the pay, and then the fact that these are products. I was curious about the value chain. Is it that people are buying the game and then getting interested in the professional sports and watching it and spending money to go to events? Or is it that people are watching and then saying, oh, that's a cool game, I want to buy it? What is the direction?
Yeah, which came first, the chicken or the egg, huh?
So
that's a good question, too.
yeah,
Go ahead,
I mean,
Barry. Introduce the question.
the question was when we meant there was a mention about this being a product. So do people buy the game, then get interested in esport, or do people get interested in esport and buy the game? It's actually both. Because a lot of for these developers, esports is a huge marketing tool for them. So you have a strong player base, you get the hardcore community on because they're more interested in, they'll keep up to date on a game's development cycle, and then they'll get interested on the hype generating it around it, and then hype generates around it, and then the developer tries to go from an esports perspective. Then they get more people who see the esport, then start playing the game, because it's a marketing tool, essentially. That's the best way to think about esports for these devs. It is a giant marketing campaign. And that's why Riot invests so darn heavily into it, and they've been very, very successful. And that's why all these other devs are starting to look, trying to make their games with esports in mind. So it's both, to put it very simply.
Let somebody else pick one.
to you guys.
Go white shirt. Yeah.
Simply, how come, and this is a good example, how come fighting games aren't in the same conversation? Because this whole time we
Good
watch
question.
it, and,
Yeah.
they just struggle to.
So the so the
No
question
love. No
was
love for the
why
fighting games.
wasn't fighting games really in the conversation? Is like what's the deal with fighting games essentially? Is that correct?
Why are they having a hard time? Because everyone else is like definitely in this tier, and fighting games is red as such out.
Right.
Could be the motor skills required, Certainly can't play it like easily.
So I would say that's going to change very soon. I think 2017 is the year of the fighting game, mainly because yes, there's a lot of organizations going into the fighting game community and paying. I can't give specific names, but I can give specific numbers. Something like $3,000, $3,500 a month, which equates to about 60K. No, wait, wow, I'm stuck at math. 36K. Sorry.
Good math, Barry.
There was a reason why I switched from mechanical engineering to bio. But the thing is that we're starting to see a lot more investment into the fighting games community, and the community has been a lot more receptive of that. Previously, I think there was some weird stuff with like Melee where they're like, oh, we want to be grassroots, oh, we're special, and then like sometimes the community held itself back. But the thing is that we're starting to see more money being put into the genre. A lot more teams and organizations are starting to see that there is a good return that comes out of investing in these players. So with that, it kind of snowballs on itself. And I think we're kind of going to see this come to fruit this year in 2017.
Yeah, I actually disagree with Barry's opinion here. I think that if you look at all the other like kind of esports that are huge at the moment, they've always had like a really robust kind of spectator audience on a daily basis. When you go to the front page of Twitch, oh, there's Hearthstone, there's Overwatch. Even now, even though it's only not even been a year, League of Legends is always number one almost all the time. There's Dota. And I don't think the fighting game community has ever really had that. So I don't think it really has the capacity to grow in the kind of same sense a lot of these other titles have in looking at 2017. And as for why that is, I'm not sure. The best I can speculate is maybe just because of the fact that it's a 1v1 kind of game. If you look at a lot of like traditional sports, you see American football, huge. Soccer is pretty big. I mean, worldwide soccer is the biggest sport.
If you're talking about worldwide, you say football.
Yeah, when you look at things like tennis, which is a really competitive, really interesting sport to watch, it just doesn't get the same numbers when you have a 1v1. And I think kind of the team component makes people perhaps more invested. I'm not quite sure, but that's probably my best guess.
Boxing used to be and continuing in Macau, and that's not team either. So.
And I also want to counter with golf as one of the world's biggest sports because it is. Tiger Woods made $1 billion in like 2006 from like sponsorships and stuff like that. That's absurd. And so I think fighting games definitely do have that capacity. It does need to grow like a market. I don't know. I'm not qualified to say where that would come from, but it maybe better presentation. Showing Evo and ESPN, great. So you kind of just push it more that way, production value. Because I feel like I see a lot of just YouTube videos of these two people sitting in front of the screen and just a crowd kind of gathered around them. And that's like, my initial impression of fighting games. But I know that's not what it is at all. You see Evo and you just fill a stadium with people and, enjoy a fighting game match. Like it just needs to grow. The presentation. I think if you make it look a lot prettier, people will come.
Yeah, and
if you build it.
To continue the counter train onto Reza, essentially, if you look at the viewer statistics for a lot of these fighting game tournaments over the years, it consistently grows from tournament to tournament. And while there may not be like dedicated streamers on Twitch or Zubu and other platforms, I think that's less of an issue, mainly because it's difficult to stream fighting games, and there's a couple of good fighting game streamers out there, but it's a very different kind of medium to work with. But if you look at the actual tournaments themselves, you get very good viewership. You have strong interest from the community, and honestly, to be quite frank, like teams wouldn't be investing if they thought this was a this was a black hole.
Yeah.
All right.
One more. We'll do one more question.
Diva.
I think so. Yeah.
Alright. For games that keep adding things, so like League, Overwatch, Dota, add champions and even maps and stuff, what do you think is going to happen in the pro scene? So like for League of Legends, for example, it's like a huge learning curve for people that are just starting a game. For pros like that want to like up and come from like that start, maybe like last year, this year, so far, like do you think the pro scene is going to die down at any point because of the learning curve, or like?
So the question was, with games that Joey was talking about, how they're kind of updating the map or updating the game constantly instead of releasing new titles. You kind of get the huge excess of like content at some point. Like, and when is that too much? So I guess the question was like,
Will it hinder
will
new
that hurt
talent?
the pro scene? I would say it might, in the end, it might like kind of discourage a little bit of new players. One thing I know that StarCraft 2 has done, they rotate out different maps for like the different races to like play against each other on, but they rotate out old maps. So if you're looking at a game like Overwatch that does use map rotations, or StarCraft, that's one tool you can use to kind of keep new players not too overwhelmed, because if you've had 20 maps total but you're only using 10, that does kind of like make it a little more accessible. In terms of League of Legends, I've spoken to some rioters on this issue, and they said that at some point they plan on like having a cap to the number of champions. They said they don't know when that is, and I'm not really sure what they're planning on doing once they reach that stage. We saw with the actual preseason changes, usually they kind of change the whole mechanics of the game through the jungle and mastery system every year in League of Legends, and this year is a much smaller change. So the game is changing a little bit less, so I think they'll just have to be creative to find new ways once they hit the cap of champions, whatever that may be.
And with that, with that, we're going to have to cut it with that. We would like you to thank you for coming to this, and if you could, under the guidebook section, please tell us about the feedback and take care of that, and hopefully we can do this again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.